Draymond Green. Draymond Green, obviously, he had that suspension as he has pretty much every year the last several years. This time, smacking Joseph Nurkic in the face, which was the most
Yeah.
ridiculous play I've ever seen. He was suspended indefinitely, but he has been reinstated and he will return to the Warriors. But news came out, or he should say that Draymond Green reported that he was talked out of retirement by Adam Silver
Yeah.
for his character.
Yeah, he was talked out of retiring with Adam Silver. Draymond Green was basically in a point where he's like, I don't know how much I can take this anymore. It's so much pressure when I keep getting suspended for kicking people in the nuts, hitting LeBron in the jewels, repeatedly reducing Steven Adams' chances of having a family, not once, but twice, smacking people in the face, elbowing people, talking trash on my podcast, and then being the victim in the situation, somehow turning it around to act like Draymond Green is the one who's being victimized when he gets suspended. It's like, dude, you smacked Nurkic, you hit LeBron in the family jewels. It's like Bronnies don't come around that often. Maybe LeBron wants to have another one. You called him a bitch there, which is something you don't do with another man. Like, it's not as relevant as it was, but it's still like you got yourself suspended in an NBA Finals. You always lead the league in technical fouls. It's like this is something that's on you, and the fact that you're like, oh, I can't take the pressure of smacking people in the face. It's like you want to retire because of that. It's like, okay, maybe you're not the same player you used to be, and that's why you want to retire. But just because you got suspended, it's like you should have made up your mind during the off season, not while you were suspended for hitting someone in the face. It's like that's on you, bud. Control your own emotions.
Yeah, I feel like he just should have retired at that point.
Yeah,
What does he have to prove? He's got four titles and he's not the same player. The Warriors right now are terrible. So like him saying he's going to retire, I'm like, you should have. You should have retired. What are you going to be at this point? What are the Warriors going to be? The Warriors dynasty is over at this point. Klay Thompson can't shoot anymore. It's really just Steph Curry and nobody else at this point. You have a couple of young guys who are decent, but at this point, with him saying they want to retire, like just retire. Like
yeah.
don't talk about this. And if you're retiring because you're getting punished by the NBA for yet another dirty play, you should have retired because you're going to keep doing this. Like go off into the sunset. You'll be remembered better if you stop with all this nonsense that's been piling up over the last several years.
Yeah, it's like how many times are you going to jeopardize your team's chances to win? How many times are you going to get suspended and not be there for your team in the playoffs? How many times are you going to be more of a liability than a benefit to your team on the court? And it's like, how many times are you going to be the reason that your team loses instead of win because you do something dumb? How many times are you going to get kicked out of an NBA game during the playoffs? It's like at some point you're an adult, you're a grown up. It's like you're more beneficial to the Warriors when you're on the court. And this whole excuse that, well, I need to get my team fired up and set the tone. It's like you need to set the tone by smacking someone in the face and then getting kicked out of the game. It's like, no, Steph needs other veteran players on the court. They need your defense. They need your leadership on the court, not being kicked off of the court when your team needs you the most. And it's happened multiple times in the playoffs. It's like at the end of the day, like most of this is on you, and stop looking for sympathy when clearly you've created these problems for yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Draymond needs to grow up, and he's an older player. He's been in the league for 14 years now, and yet he's continuously acted this way. It kind of speaks to how he's been, and I want to think of Draymond in a positive light. I want to think of him as someone who's been a part of this great dynasty and been able to be a part of one of the most dominant teams I've ever been able to see. But instead, the longer he plays, the more I see him become ultimately what he is, which is just a dirty player at the end of the time. And he's a solid facilitator. But other than that, it's been a lot of just dirty plays that's going to define his career.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of dirty plays, and he's going to be forever known the guy that's like, what if? With that 73-9 team, like Steph's knees were barely hanging on in that series. You're on pace to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you blew it. You got suspended in that game because you couldn't control your emotions, and we could be having a very different discussion about the Warriors potentially winning that series. I know LeBron and Kyrie get crazy hot, but the fact that he was out for game 6, and then by the time he came back in game 7, the Cavs had already taken the momentum, and it's like you can't help but think, what if Draymond didn't get suspended? And it wasn't Adam Silver's fault that you hit LeBron in the nuts. Maybe you could say NBA shouldn't have suspended him, but they do have rules, right? They do have conducts in place. They do have player conduct guidelines there, and you knowingly broke them, and you potentially cost your team a championship, and then you were crying in the parking lot calling Kevin Durant to come save you next year because you got suspended.
Yeah, exactly. He's been a thorn in the Warriors' side, albeit, and what ultimately cost him that 73-9 season. But hopefully, with the suspension, he smartens up and can mature a little bit. But
I
it's
don't think
kind
he
of been
will.
one of those things that teaching an old dog new tricks just isn't common, and especially with how Draymond's been his entire career. I don't see him evolving into that figure here.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think like you've had so many years, and if there was a time to change, it would have been after that 73-9 series where you cost your team a championship, but he's like insistent on doing this. So it's like, okay, Draymond Green is one of the best players of all time. He's one of the best defenders in the league. Not taking anything away from him as a player, but if he's not going to move on from this character and he thinks he needs to hit people in the nuts and smack people in the face to give his team an edge and get kicked off the court, okay, that's on you, bud.